So against this backdrop of the really spectacular view up here, all around, I'm going to start off this video about grizzly bear stories. And the purpose of this is to be able to have you understand that part of being able to convince someone in marketing business situations to believe what you're saying about a product requires you to be good at explaining things. In fact, I could extend that and say the number one most important thing of graduating from a college or university is that you learn how to describe and explain things. And so what I do when I'm talking to students about different things, I use what they call grizzly bear stories. I'll explain this in a few minutes. So looking on the west side of my property, there's a video I've been promising to make you guys for some time about grizzly bear stories. So I'm going to go over here where I have my little sort of studio set up. I'm walking along the southwest now, going to the south edge of our property, the part that I cut the grass on. And this is looking out onto a bunch of raspberry brambles, which I leave there because they're good for slowing down the coyotes when they want to come in the yards. We've got a couple little apple trees here, which are good because they feed the whitetails in the wintertime, and all kinds of little insects and small animals eat that stuff. And then we're going over here to my most recent piece of maple that I got cut, piled that up in April and May. And I've got my little studio set up here where I'm going to do this video about the grizzly bear stories. Yeah, don't breathe so heavy. Stop panting. You haven't run 500 miles. Okay, Ranger, just lie down, lie down. We're on TV right now. Lie down, lie down. Okay, grizzly bear story. So, here's how this happened. My brother lived up in the Yukon for about 20 years. You stay back here. Okay, just chew on that moldy apple. Okay, go ahead. My brother lived up in the Yukon for about 20 years. When he came to visit me, halfway through that time period, we were sitting on the couch in my living room. We were watching a football game. And we're switching channels back and forth. And this hunting show came on. It was a very brief sort of clip, and all we saw was just a bear running towards these people. A couple shots rang out, and the bear fell down. My brother's sitting beside me. He goes, "That's not the way it happens." I looked at him and went, "What?" He says, "That's not the way it happens." I said, "How'd you know?" He said, "Because I shot a grizzly bear." I went, "Wow, you shot a grizzly bear?" Because I knew up there they had moose, and he shot caribou and elk and even some goats and up in the mountains and so on. We had quite a wild experiences over those decades. But I didn't know they ever shot a grizzly bear because my brother wouldn't really do something like that unless his life was in danger. Anyhow, I said to him, well, tell me, elaborate, explain the story. He said, well, not much to say, Tim. He said, we're just walking through the woods, grizzly bear charged, shot it. That's it. I said, you're kidding me, right? And he says, yeah. He said, I sat down and smoked 3 cigarettes back to back. So I said to him, no, tell me the details. And he said, there's nothing else to say. I just shot the grizzly bear. I said, well, what'd you do with it afterwards? He said, well, we just left it there. He said, we were about 400 miles away in the bush, and we couldn't carry that heavy load of meat to hide or anything like that. And darkness was coming, and we were going to run out of fuel, and so on. So, that was the end of the story. Now, I was relating this to another family member of ours, my dad actually. And I said to him, this is what happened. He goes, oh, really, what happened? So I embellished the story because my dad was in his early 80s, and I said to him, you probably want to have the whole thing. So I made up this kind of little extended version of the grizzly bear story. And I said, well, my brother and his brother-in-law were walking along this riverbed. It was early in the morning. The sun was coming up over the hillside there. The dew was on the grass. When you're walking along, your feet are kind of wet. You can see some bulrushes, some reeds kind of swaying up in the distance, like when there's some kind of animal moving, all of a sudden a bunch of birds lift off really fast, like there's some kind of danger approaching. So they kind of grabbed their rifles just a little bit more firmly and kind of looked and strained to see what was coming through the morning mist coming off the cool water of the creek meeting the warm air. And all of a sudden a big huge moose burst into view, and it was heading right straight for them. Big antlers, dripping water from where it had been in up to its waist, and it was charging straight towards them. And as it got towards them, it could see them. They kind of waved their hands, and the moose turned and went up this steep hill. And as it was going up the steep hill, the clods, the hooves were digging in clods of earth were flying and everything like that, and you could see the water fletching off its fur and so on. And then behind it, about 100 yards behind it, came a grizzly bear, just charging, and you could see the muscles rolling at its shoulders as it was sort of galloping forward, and these big huge claws in the earth just digging up and flying things and snorting, and a whole bunch of little flies lifting off and so on. And the bear didn't follow the moose. The bear just continued straight towards us. So my brother-in-law was about 3 feet in front of me, and he opened fire first with his rifle and fired 5 shots. Stepped to the left. I brought up my 12-gauge shotgun with head slugs, fired 3 shots, and we could see each shot hit the bear, you know, and the flesh would hit, and you could see little bits of fur fly out, and sort of a wince of the body like that, but it just kept coming just like a train. And eventually it slid to a stop about 10 feet away from us, kind of head going off to one side, the jaw open, breathing its last breath, tongue coming out across the teeth, heaving big sigh, and then stopped like that. Bear was dead. And I sat down, smoked 3 cigarettes back to back. So, question is, which story do you like better? My story or my brother's story? Well, here's why I call it Grizzly Bear stories. When you graduate and you work in marketing business, you need to be able to explain to people things in a kind of interesting, not necessarily sensationalistic, but some of that visceral way so people can really get your point. And your ability to do this, either in pitching a proposal or asking for a raise or getting permission to go to a conference or asking about a new product launch you want to get involved in or so on, is going to depend upon you being able to have words that excite and interest the person who's listening to you. That's what I call Grizzly Bear stories. It's all kinds of things that you'll pick up like this, right? It could be the story of Canada Goose, right? And how it started and how it expanded and then decided to go outside Canada. It could be the story of Roots Canada. It could be the story of Tim Hortons. All these companies got little equivalents of Grizzly Bear stories where there's something interesting about them that happened with a product launch, or it could be the way they developed a joint venture or whatever, and you're going to tuck them way up in your mind. And when the situation comes and somebody asks you a question about some new type of product, you'll say, well, make sure you don't do what Canada Goose did back in 2005, or make sure you don't make the mistake that Tim Hortons did when they joint ventured with Wendy's, or make sure that you don't get caught by Roots making too much of your product overseas. You can no longer put the Made in Canada label on it. These are all kinds of little mini Grizzly Bear stories that you're going to have. So that's what I mean when I talk in class about telling you a Grizzly Bear story. It's a story about a company, a brand, a product, a situation, a marketing activity, which became quite well known, and there's a learning thing from that. Either learning how to avoid a mistake or learning to copy that because it's a good example of saving resources and getting good customer interest. So that's my Grizzly Bear story. What do you think, Ranger?